Hi, so sticking with American politics, I have just watched a video by Robert Reich, who was in the Clinton administration, and he has a channel which particularly focuses on inequality in America. I think he has a lot of important points to make. This particular video was on his views as to why the Democrats lost in 2024. And the overriding theme that he puts out is that it was the economy, and I think that's true. But in the start of the video, it's a short video, 5 minutes. I'll put a link in this video. He um he rejects the notion it had anything to do at all with the culture wars or anything to do with rejection of left wing politics or more aptly woke politics. And he showed archive of someone, Democrat senator, saying we need to get out of this hostage. We need to stop being hostages of the far left. I'm not sure who that was. Need to look at it again. But Reich totally rejects this. He says no, it's nothing to do with that. And yes, racism and misogyny did play a role, as he suggests. That's what he claims. On that point, without question, there is racism and misogyny and other forms of bigotry within Magaland. There's no question about that. I don't think anyone could look at the sort of poison that was coming out of some of those rallies and pretend otherwise. But that doesn't explain why many women and minority people support Trump. There's just no getting away from that. If you want to portray Trump as the figurehead of a white supremacist movement, how do you explain Hispanics, black people, women voting for this? It doesn't make sense. I think it's too. I don't think you could just. Uh, the left have to stop going down that line of saying, "Well, Trump got elected because America suddenly switched to the hard right." I'm not saying Reich was suggesting that. But there are Democrats who explain Harris's losses. Oh well, it must be sexism because she's a woman. It's the same line they used when Hillary Clinton lost. Now, it is quite striking that the United States of America, it's one of the few Western democracies, France is another, that has still not had a woman leader at the very top. Britain has, Germany has, Canada has, um, Italy has now. So, that's striking. Um, I think my own feelings is I'll get a little bit more into the points of making the video, but my own feelings is that the Democrats had a very messy campaign. I think Biden does have to answer for some of that. I know the First Lady blames Nancy Pelosi, you know, Joe Biden blames Pelosi, but Biden, both the former president and the First Lady, need to accept that his age was a factor. I think they need to stop pretending that this wasn't an issue. Um, Biden had put himself out as a transitional president. Now, I think if he had kind of bowed out of his own will rather than succumbing to the pressure, he would be held in very high regard. I mean, when Dean Phillips ran against him, Phillips was basically castigated from the party for being a traitor. And eventually it took senior Democrats like Nancy Pelosi to speak up and say, look, we have to see the problem here. Biden's first debate performance against Trump was a mess, but I don't think even that was it. Everyone can have an off night. Obama didn't perform that well in his first debate with Romney. But I think it was more than that. Joe Biden was literally drifting off at meetings. His age was a factor, and I think he just needs to accept that. So does the former First Lady. I think Biden's stubbornness was a problem. Um, he had said he would be a transitional leader, but then by deciding that he was going to run for a second term, it was just a very big mistake. That meant that Harris only had a couple of months. Now, I don't think she ran a terrible campaign, actually. I think she done her best. I think she ran a relatively centrist campaign. She did touch on issues that were topical, like the abortion issue and other things, but she did not push an overtly identity politics message. She didn't say, vote for me because I'm a woman. She didn't say, vote for me because I would be the first Asian American, Black American woman president. She did touch on bread and butter issues. The problem is it just wasn't enough. And this is where I agree with Reich. The economy was such a big thing. If you look at what motivated Democrat voters and what motivated Republican voters, they were starkly different. For example, the issue of state of democracy, just 18% of Republican voters said that was an issue. A very large proportion of Democrats saw that as an issue. I thought it was an issue because of Trump's contempt for democracy in 2021. Incidentally, I saw some Trump voters interviewed on this with the BBC, and they said, accept that you lost. Well, the Democrats have accepted it. There hasn't been any violent insurrection. I think it is an absolute disgrace. I'll just say this because I may not make a specific video on it. I think it's an absolute disgrace that Trump has pardoned these violent criminals. It's a disgrace. And the message is clear. As long as you support me, you're going to get exonerated, no matter what you've done. To be fair, there was one woman who basically came round thinking, showing some contrition and admitting they were wrong, and she actually rejected the pardon. She thought, okay, I have to pay for what I've done, but she's a minority. Most of them are remorseless. I think that it just shows Trump for what he is, an absolute disgrace. And again, getting into this immigration issue, you know, I'm I don't come from this from a sort of ultra liberal perspective. I do think there need to be controls. I think Trump's right to go hard against cartels. But the problem is he isn't just going against cartels, he's going against everyone. You know, if someone has been in the United States for years, they might have served in the armed forces, they pay taxes, but they came in as an undocumented person. Should they really be condemned for the rest of their life? Should they be sent back to a country like Honduras or El Salvador with rampant crime rates? I think that's callous. So Trump's going to punish those sort of people, but he's allowing violent, essentially borderline domestic terrorists a green light. It's a disgrace. Um, but yeah, Harris had a short time to run her campaign. There is one thing that needs to be clear, though. Trump did not get a landslide. He got a comfortable victory. But if you actually look at presidential performances in elections, it's not even close to a landslide. Compare it to what Calvin Coolidge got in, I think it was 1924. Um, compare it to FDR's landslide victories. Compare it to Richard Nixon's victory in 1972, Reagan's victory in 1984. It doesn't even come close. It was a comfortable victory, but that was it. Um, if you actually look at the margin, it was nothing overly impressive. Um, so what Wright started off by saying is totally dismissing the identity politics thing, and I think that's wrong. I think he is wrong to dismiss that. Now, polling has showed that I'm not sure which source he was citing, but he suggested that 57% of Republicans like foreign policy, only 25% abortion, 80% the economy, and this is the big point that Reich was touching on, but 90% immigration, an even higher proportion for immigration. In other words, two big things for Republicans, Trump voters, was 90% immigration, 80% the economy. Um, Reich ends by saying that immigrants shouldn't be scapegoated, and he's right about that. And he's right about the economy factor. He said that the Democrats failed to get the message across. To be fair to Joe Biden, he did actually start to bring the party more back to the working class. He did actually bring in antitrust laws. He did start an infrastructure project. The problem is, in a single term, those things were just starting. Too long, the Democrats have been perceived to be drifting away from the working class. And I suppose you'd have to look at the Obama years for that. Um, Reich had served in the Clinton administration. Bill Clinton, of course, went to the third way, the center ground. Um, but from what I know of the Clinton years, Bill Clinton's administration explicitly didn't overly promote identity politics. At least Clinton himself didn't. He sought a centrist message. Um, but something has definitely happened in recent years where the Democrats are associated, rightly or wrongly, with the hard left. And you have to look at the situation in states like California and New York, the criminality there, the homeless problem in California. This is something that, I read an interesting piece in the Times which pointed out that when there's a disaster, and Republicans criticize the Democrat administration, they're accused of exploiting it for political gain. And the Democrats are, kind of exonerated for their management failings. And yet, when a Republican is presiding over it, like George W. Bush and Hurricane Katrina, they're completely attacked for failing people. So the left can't have it both ways. I do think California has to take some responsibility for what happened with the wildfires. Now, Trump is callous to suggest that he wouldn't give federal support to punish them for not voting for him. But I think this is going to come back to haunt Gavin Newsom in 2028 if he runs. That's not to say that he's entirely to blame. That would be wrong. Karen Bass certainly should take some responsibility as mayor of Los Angeles. But again, there's distortion going on here. I don't think it's as black and white as there was, a cut to the fire service because of homeless programs. There's a lot of components involved. The Democrats do need to take some responsibility for the mess in their own states. Um, New York, we've seen a situation with women being violently attacked on the streets. There may well be a racial component to that. Often it's been a situation of a white victim and a black offender. Now, the Democrats are never going to touch that. That would be too taboo. We can't talk about that. You could be damn sure if it was the other way around, say a minority woman and a white guy, they'd be all over it. So I do think there's double standards there, but what happens to get a tap on the wrist? They're let out on parole. It's the conclusion has to be that California and New York have got soft on crime. This infuriates people. I mean, if I was a victim of crime, I would not be keen on the Democrats. Um, but the point Reich just making is what the Democrats have to do is continue to explain why it's not the fault of immigrants. They have to convince voters that Republican presidents, particularly Trump, is only going to give corporate welfare. He's only going to, they need to be demanding limits on CEO pay, stronger unions, all that sort of thing. I think that's all very valid. And I think that is definitely a way to get more Democratic support. It should be remembered Biden did have an overwhelming victory in 2020. So Biden was astute enough then. The point I would make, though, is the Biden of 2020 simply wasn't the Biden of 2024 you know, and it's unfortunate. That's the truth. I think the Democrats actually have a chance in 2028 if they get some of this stuff together. But Reich and other Democrats who want to pretend that the culture war stuff is irrelevant. I mean, if they're telling a blue collar worker, we sympathize with you, but remember you've got white privilege, it's a contradictory message. The Democrats have aggressively pushed critical race theory. They have aggressively pushed the trans narrative. I mean, I was just doing a review on Designated Survivor. Season 3 of Designated Survivor, I think it's kind of realistic in the sense that it shows the way the Democratic Party is these days. So centrist Democrats really need to recognize this and say, no, we need to appeal to all Americans. And you're not going to convince a white blue collar worker that you're the answer if you're telling them you've got white privilege. Now, this doesn't mean that Trump is their answer. Of course he's not. He's a carnival barker. He's a charlatan. He's a demagogue. He is going to make life easier for the super rich. There's no question about that. I don't think Elon Musk or Donald Trump really have the interests of ordinary people at heart. I really don't think they do. Um, I think Robert Reich is absolutely right to say that the Democrats have to get this issue of the economy right. They have to understand how people are feeling. I think in the convention I mentioned this, it looked like a party atmosphere. It just looked like a big party when people were struggling. It looked tone deaf. So I think they need to show a little bit of humility in the next DNC. They need to tone it down a little bit. It's not to say that serious issues weren't discussed, but it was too triumphal as they were acting like they'd won already, and of course they hadn't. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'll put a link to Reich's video. I agree with him on the economy thing, but I think he's wrong to totally say, no, no, it's got nothing to do with a rejection of the hard left. There was a rejection of the hard left because a lot of Americans are fed up of left wing ideologues saying, there's 56 genders. There's critical race theory, you have white privilege. All that sort of stuff is toxic and divisive. And I don't think those should be major issues, but it is the left that keeps pushing this in public schools. It's the left that keep pushing this stuff. And just like in Britain, the right have simply pushed back against it. Now, I am thoroughly depressed that Trump won. I still find it, very distasteful that that man is in the White House. He's a compulsive liar. He's a convicted felon. His antics so far, pardoning the January the 6th insurrection, it's a disgrace. And I hope these 4 years go fast. I really do. But then, we could advance in the White House. He's only 40. He's the third youngest vice president after John T. Breckinridge and Richard Nixon. And Vance is just Trump Jr. So I don't know. It's a depressing situation, but I really, really, really hope the Democrats win in 2028. But I want them to take a harder line on crime. I mean, they're absolutely right about gun control. They need to take a harder line on the sort of crime that's going on in Democratic run cities. Um, I think they need to really drop some of the divisive woke stuff. I mean, talking about critical race theory, you could talk about racial injustice, you could talk about issues affecting Asian Americans and Black Americans, that's all valid. But don't do it at the point of portraying all white people as the enemy, unless, of course, they slavishly go along with that narrative. Don't be so hypersensitive to inject a perception of bigotry in everything, looking for reasons to be offended. I abhor that sort of stuff, and I do think it really puts people off the Democratic Party, just as it puts people off the Labour Party in Britain. Um, as a centrist, I utterly reject it because I don't think it's tolerant. I don't think it's genuinely progressive. Um, and I think it is divisive, because if you're a hardline identitarian, you're not bringing people together. If you're saying, we need to understand the struggles of African Americans and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans. That's all very well. If you're simultaneously saying, oh, we're going to, just tell white people they've got privilege, no matter what their own circumstances are, that's no one's going to thank you for that. So I'm not sure that the Democrats still get it. And I don't blame them, incidentally, for talking about democracy. I do think that was important. But they didn't talk enough about the issues that concern Trump voters. They just didn't. They should have done that a lot more. But, I don't think they should have ignored those issues either. I would not criticize Kamala Harris for talking about that. I think she was right to. I think she was morally right to. And there may be aspects of that campaign where the Democrats were morally right, but politically misguided. And I'll wrap this up, but I'll put a link to that video. Summed up, I think Reich is correct to say that the economy was a major factor that the Democrats got wrong. But I think it's wrong to dismiss the animosity towards the sort of woke left narratives that were being put out constantly by the Democrats. Look at the reaction after George Floyd's death, the violence across American cities. Look at Nancy Pelosi's reaction to that. The Democrats done far too little to condemn the violence. Their response to that was pathetic. They should have been unequivocally condemning the violence, not just saying, "Oh, it's wrong." We support arrest. They should have been unequivocally condemning it. They should have been condemning Black Lives Matter. And then this gets into an issue of Democratic caucuses, but as far as I'm concerned, BLM is a liability for the Democrats. And I think a lot of Black Americans are starting to reject it now with good reason. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, but I abhor the Trump administration, and I just hope, I really hope, Trump himself can only do one term, but if Vance continues, it will just be a continuation of Trumpism. So I really, really hope in 2028 the Democrats can get their act together.